Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Sync, for having me speak at this great event. Greetings, everyone. I saw people joining from, I think, South Carolina, Dallas. I saw Toronto in there. I think I saw Atlanta. So welcome, everybody. I'm sure you're all looking forward to getting back into the in-person conferences, but plenty of opportunity to learn here today in a virtual conference. And of course, the hot topic of talking about data and analytics and machine learning. So really glad to be here. As Jason said, I've had a number of different careers. I've sat in the seat of being a CTO and a CIO. I am a prolific writer and speaker. You can see my book there, Driving Digital. I have over 700 articles now published between my blog and InfoWorld. I do most of my speaking and writing on digital transformation, and most of what I cover under digital transformation gets into application development, DevOps, being agile, and so forth. But I'm really glad to be talking today about something that I was really an early adopter on, going back 10 years when I was a CIO, trying to build an analytics set of products in the construction industry, in the media industry, and then in financial services, and trying to figure out how do you build customer-facing analytics, so products that your customers are using your proprietary data. How do you enable people in your organization to get smarter with data? And then how do you also improve the underlying data governance, whether it's security or policies or just the entire data operations that are running your analytics programs? And so I'm going to share many of these practices. In fact, the title says 3. I'm going to be sharing 5 today, so you get a bonus. And I'm going to show you today also how to learn more about how to apply them. But where I want to start from is just a recognition that the world has changed significantly over the last year and a half because of the way we're working from post-COVID. We adapted to remote working, and now we're readapting to hybrid working. And you can see some of the numbers here that people are looking to become more productive and recognizing that at times they're more productive when they're working remotely, that 73% of employees want to stay or want to work for companies that continue with some form of remote working, and 39% are saying they might even quit their jobs if they're feeling the environments are too restrictive. And so what this says to me is, the need to rethink what sustainable ways of working are like for your companies needs to get redrawn. Remember, people have been working remotely for 15 months now. So the collaborative model needs to change, whether you're going 100% remote, 100% in office. It's just not going to be the same thing as it was 16 months ago. And I'm starting to call this the real digital transformation 2.0. And the reason is because customers' experience and what they're looking is changing dramatically. It's because supply chains have different forms of risk. If you're in autos, your chips are delayed. If your lumber prices are higher than they ever were before. And clearly your employees are thinking about how they want to work going forward. And so for those of you, you're all involved in data and analytics, thinking through what a data-driven organization means, what does customer experience looks like, how do you get competitive advantages with AI and predictive analytics? I suspect all this is in the backdrop of anybody who's working on the analytics side of the equation. And for those of you who are more on the data side, on the governance, on the data ops side, you're thinking about how to improve quality, how to secure your data, and all of these play out. I'm glad to see a first question here. Remember, I do have time at the end to answer your questions. And so let's just continue on and talk about what are some of the things I'm seeing. And I'm going to share with you some elements from my book and from my blog to start out with. Just a reminder, I give away a lot of my information for free. And I do this to help everybody just become smarter people in your fields. This is an exact quote from the book that published it's 2017, so it's 4 years ago now. And when you're thinking about citizen data scientists, what you're really looking for are people who are ready to ask questions. These are typically emerging leaders in your organization. They're trying to challenge the status quo. They're not liking the way things are running. They're using data as a source of getting insights and getting their answers. And this is what I called citizen data scientists back in the book. In the book at the time, there was a notion of citizen developers, and I expanded on that to include citizen data scientists, is really looking at people who had the skills to work with data. They were probably working with spreadsheets. They had a mindset of understanding how the business was operating, and they were looking for more tools. And tools they were using included things like Power BI and Tableau, things that really made people in their organization a lot more versatile in being able to reproduce data sets and come up with dashboards and answer questions around it. And so I'm starting this because I want to make sure we're level set around what a citizen data science is, and why it's so important. Because, when we look at what's happening in the industry, this slide is a year and a half old now, but just looking at the number of companies and a number of organizations looking to hire PhD level data scientists, or data scientists that are trained in Python and TensorFlow and Scikit, that are fairly versatile in all the data ops technologies. We all know that they're expensive to hire, they're hard to keep, they're very competitive. And so for organizations that probably have the same thing happening in their data programs, more data, more questions, more analytics than they can serve with their data scientists, trying to expand the ability to do more with data is essentially what we're trying to do in citizen data science programs. And what we're trying to replace is all the manual work that people have done historically through spreadsheets, right? Anytime I got to export data, put it in a spreadsheet, do an analysis, some of it is formula driven, but worse is when it's copy and paste oriented. Worse is when a spreadsheet has macros built into it, or copying and pasting and manual work into this. And we know that those spreadsheets become operational way too quickly. They're hard to reproduce. And when that person leaves the organization, nobody knows how that spreadsheet is working. So when we think about citizen data science, we're starting to look at what are the tools and what are the capabilities to take people who are strong at data and enabling them to become more versatile in building something that's repeatable and supportable and sustainable. So that's what we mean by data science. This is just a slide coming back from my past. I was talking to you about how I got to do this. At McGraw-Hill Construction, that's a company that McGraw-Hill divested, is now called Dodge Data and Analytics. We ended up building products for the construction industry that were completely based on Tableau inside. You could see one of the screenshots of one of our products that was helping people in manufacturing, building product manufacturers and general contractors understand the direction the market was going and where to build, and when there was greater demand. So we built a bunch of products on top of Tableau, and then we helped our marketers take all the data that was coming out of their campaigns, that was coming out of our websites, and really do a data-driven lead gen program with all the data coming from all the tools that they were using. And we taught them how to use Tableau. We taught them best data practices around it. And that was essentially my foray into how do you build sustainable citizen data science programs. Now let's shift gears and let's now look on the other side of this, right? And so what people say to me sometimes is, Isaac, before you get into citizen data science, don't you need to put the data governance in place? Don't you need to have high data quality and address data issues and security around things? And the answer is yes. You need to start down that path, but we also have to look at what are the things that people are trying to do with data and make sure that they're able to fulfill that. And I call that proactive data governance. It means not waiting for a problem, not waiting and putting the data governance first. It's allowing the use of data, the use of analytics and machine learning to create the demand for the types of data governance that you're looking for. So it's an offensive strategy. It's basically saying, let's focus on the areas that are going to drive business impact, and let's do the things that are not just going to keep us in compliance, but are also going to improve data quality. If you looked at this slide and this picture for me a couple of years ago, it was all one color. I called it proactive data governance. And now we're thinking of this in terms of two terms. Data governance that really talks about policies and security and just managing data catalogs. And then the data ops side, how we're integrating data and automating that integration, how we're putting automation into our data quality, into our mastering of data, and how we're building core competencies and being able to find data sources to enrich our data. So these are just some of the things that go into these programs. And what we're really trying to do is instill some discipline into the process, right? We're not going to just put up a new set of tools and allow everybody to work with the data the same way they work with spreadsheets. If we do that, we're going to end up with better tools, maybe some better insights and some better automation, but not necessarily something sustainable. We also know we can't go to our business users and say, let's talk about data governance, let's talk about security, because guess what? They cringe on those terms. They don't know what they mean. They don't know why they're participating. They'll come back to you if you're in technology or data and say that's your problem to go fix. And so building a program that brings citizen data scientists with data governance expertise allows that demand model to pull you into what you need to accomplish. Now, again, I've been sharing you up till now a lot of material that is actually on my blog and in my book. You can see my blog on the left-hand side, my writing on InfoWorld in the middle, my 5 Minutes with NY Wyke YouTube channel, and my newsletter that I share. If you want to get links to all the posts that I'm talking about today, go to the URL starcio.com/sync-data. I have some of those URLs up there. And if you want the rest of them, just register for the newsletter. I'll be following them up with an email later this week with all the articles that I'm really referencing in this talk. And this is going to be your how-to guide, where to get started from when you're thinking about both the proactive data governance and citizen data science. But let's talk about the 5 areas that are going to make it sustainable, okay? And so this is where I'm going to share some new material with you. And it really first starts with this notion from portfolio management, where we're actually trying to create some set of governed set of priorities. We're not just going after the machine learning. We're not just going after predictive analytics. We're also not just going after cost and cost savings, and we're not just going after governance. We're looking for a program that's going to have some balance to it, meaning if I have 100 points of activity that I can go do over the next sprint or over the next release, let's make sure we can address things that are going to grow the business, things that are going to make the business a little bit more efficient, and also some things that are high in our data governance set of priorities. So the first thing to make it sustainable is not to look at it as one-sided, look at it as a balanced program and looking at which parts of your programs that you want to institute earlier than others because of their overall priorities. The second thing, and you heard me speak about this as an actual blog post just on this slide here, but what this is basically saying is using the analytics that you're doing, whether it's citizen self-service, whether it's real-time analytics or machine learning, using those capabilities to create a demand model for your data governance and data operations procedures. I'm going to explain a little bit what this looks like, but I advise organizations to create that exposure, show what the data looks like, try to do the analytics, do the discovery efforts, because when the data doesn't look good or it doesn't exist, or you need to institute a catalog or put some data definitions in, knowing that it has value to the business on the other side of it first means that you can now have a discussion about how to improve the underlying data ops and data governance. So this is really a story about how to create a demand model based on the analytics that you're trying to serve and using that to pull data governance and operations into the discussion. Now, how do you go about doing this? You do this with an agile process. And what this means is in many organizations, what I find is there's a technology group, there's a data group, There's an analytics and sometimes a quant group and sometimes even a separate citizen data science group. And then of course, there's the business that are often subject matter experts. I sometimes call them spreadsheet jockeys if all they're using are spreadsheets. So we have all these different groups that are typically not working together in a collaborative way. And so what I say to organizations is, let's look at what the vision is for this organization. What are we trying to accomplish? And let's start putting self-organizing multidisciplinary teams together. Let's make sure there's subject matter experts on that team. Let's make sure those, if you have a data ops tool or some data governance tools, those skills are on the team. If you have some citizen data scientists or you have a quant, let's put them on the team. And let's look at them solving a collection of set of problems together, right? So from modeling on the data science to the governance on the data governance side, from the ability to commit to the work that the group is doing. You know, what is the hypothesis going into a sprint? So what's the question that we're trying to ask? What's our hypothesis? Let's use data to back up what we're learning. Let's do some experiments, and then let's recalibrate at the end of a sprint and make sure that what we're learning is aligned with what we're trying to draw business impacts from. And what that allows us to do is, if we're heading down a direction that's not going to drive impact, if we find there's more cost to address quality, if we have to go find some new data sources to make something work, we can recalibrate the team's priorities and either put more work on the backlog for them to go and address those questions, or they can actually pivot and start working on a different data set or a different data problem. So you can see, by putting Agile in place, by putting multidisciplinary teams in place, I now have an iterative way of asking a question, letting a team come together to try to find an answer in a sprint, and then recalibrating what they're working on after that sprint. Now, what this is also doing is creating a more macro picture. Okay, this is actually a diagram that I talk a lot about in the book. So if you go get yourself a copy of the Kindle book or any of the other editions, you're going to see this diagram being talked about. And this is a different type of demand model, right? How do you get your executives to come to the table and be a part of this program where you're trying to drive change, where you're trying to use data and analytics to actually change their decision-making authorities, to change who's making what decision, and to really democratize how the organization's using data. Well, to be able to do this, I need to grow the data science programs. I can't let IT become a bottleneck. I can't allow data quality to become an issue, and I can't allow manual tools to put a slower velocity down in terms of the amount of analytics that I want to put out. So the faster that I can put data science teams that are more versatile working with data, the more likely they're going to be able to start putting some outputs out that our business leaders can look at and say, oh, we're more profitable, or maybe we need to address our risk and how we're running our business from a supply chain perspective. And now they're getting involved in this data-driven process. On the right-hand side, bottom right, what you're seeing here is that when you start looking at all the technologies and all the tools that go into becoming a data-driven organization, one of the number one things people ask me is, Isaac, where do we start from? And what I tell them is it's very different. It's very different by organization. It depends on what type of data, the volumes of data. It depends on your expertise and your skill set. But what you really want to do is, again, create that demand model so that as you are finding more areas that you cannot service with your technology, or you can't service with your automation, that's creating a demand model around being able to search for new technologies and seeing how it fits into your architecture. In the middle of all this is using these three cornerstones to figure out how the business is going to change its governance model. And so, for example, one of the things people ask me all the time is, how do we get people in the business to own the data, make decisions around data quality, make decisions around priorities? And again, if you come to them at the start of the process, they're not going to understand what data ownership means. When they see data quality issues and they understand the impact the data is going to have in their business, it's at that point you can start introducing the role and the responsibility of owning the data. So this is a framework to really bring that that demand model up into the leadership level. Now, when you think about this, take those three things I just walked you through, right? You've created a demand model from analytics into your data governance, using Agile as a process to iteratively improve your analytics and also improve your data governance. And now you're bringing leadership on board. All right, what you're starting to do is evolve what my company calls a center of excellence. Okay, what this basically means is that every period of time, you're going to take your capabilities as an organization, whether it's who is getting involved, what is your overall process, or even your ability to work with your data and your tools, and you're evolving that capability. That is a release cadence that we put together to help organizations come up with a center of excellence. You could see we do this in 5 different categories, and citizen data science is one of them, as is product management and agile delivery and DevOps. And what we're really trying to do is create a sustainable model of improving process. What this looks like in analytics is, if you see here, different forms of analytics, different ways for teams to go and use the tools that are in front of them. And again, if you think about this from a data science, from a citizen data science perspective, you could end up with 100 dashboards that look and behave differently, and would be an even bigger problem than the spreadsheets that you currently have that are doing those things. So this is coming again, ending just with one of the posts I have around citizen data science best practices. I'm sharing 3 of them here. Number 1, they use agile methodologies. They're engaging with their stakeholders. They're understanding priorities so that they can evolve what parts of the business to put analytics around. They're creating naming conventions, right? So if I look at a dimension or a measure, I'm starting to being able to look at this and understand what that means. I'm also starting to put data catalogs in place so that I know what a date means or know what a $ means. And I have a central place for anybody in the organization to go look up and find what the underlying data means when I find a source. And we're also starting to put user experience and style standards in. What are bar charts used? If you're displaying a specific dimension, what colors to use against it? What to put in the top right versus the top left corners of your dashboard? How to make sure that your dashboards are actually being designed to answer a question. So, right, so you think about picking a BI tool. It's not just about picking the BI tool and educating a growing number of people in terms of using the analytics. It's also about putting in some best practices and really some better practices, practices that you can continue to evolve through a Center of Excellence program. So that's my talk today, Jason. I told you I'd leave us plenty of time at the end for answering questions. These are the 5 areas of developing a competitive advantage. Again, pick balanced priorities, create a demand model, use Agile to prioritize and deliver, create feedback loops with your leadership, and then start building your center of excellence. And what you're seeing on the right-hand side is, this is the digital lens that I introduced in the book, Driving Digital. It's really about looking at the world through different capabilities, and obviously becoming data-driven and more analytics-driven is one of them. So thanks, Jason. Again, this is StarCIO, and again, what you're seeing on the left-hand side is our Agile methodologies, and on the right-hand side are Center of Excellence programs that we help companies with. Jason, I see 10 questions here. Where do you want to start from?
We'll kick in, and I'll leave this up, this slide up for now, so that folks can take that in. Just for folks, a few people in the chat asking, yes, there will be an on-demand version of this, so you will have the recording, so don't worry about that. You'll be able to go back and watch through. So don't worry if you're having a few issues with your computers right now. So Isaac, no better place to start than the top, really. So I'm going to jump in. Ready. So first question, do you expect any reduction in workforce issues with the work from home trend going forward, given the new AI capabilities in the industry?
First thing that we're seeing, 2 things, is people rethinking their work style that they want. Also recognizing whether they felt they were treated well during this period of time, whether they were overworked, whether they liked the place that they're living. And so if you look at some of the articles that have been coming out over the last couple of weeks, it's a lot about people changing jobs voluntarily, deciding that they've had enough, that they're going to go look for other work. So I think, the immediate trend is just this pent up, I'm not changing my job right now. It's too risky to, I think I can change my job right now. I know a little bit better about myself. I know a little bit more about the type of work I want to do and the experiences I want to grow from. And is this the right place I want to work from? I think we will get back to a question mark about how organizations are going to restaff. One of the things you have to think about when you are putting automation in place and putting artificial intelligence in place is what types of people do you need where to be able to augment what you can get out of automation and out of analytics. And it takes a different skill set, right? We're not rekeying things in. We're not, quantifying spreadsheets. We're not just reading out data. We're expecting the machine to do a lot of the automation for us. We need people to be able to interpret the data for us. And so I think that's going to create a different staffing model. And I think the smarter organizations are going to rethink the org models, who they're hiring, what types of skills they need, what types of operating models. I talked a lot about Agile today, but I think that's what you're going to see first in the first few months post that we're getting back to work, and then a very different story in the next year in terms of the types of skill sets and org models companies are doing. It's a great question.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that answer, Isaac. Next one. Do you find that creating a standard operating, and sorry, let me do that again. Do you find that creating a standard operating structure for data science makes it easier for continuity? Kind of agreeing on a language that would be used like Python.
Yeah, one of the things I do a lot in my workshops is helping companies decide where they want to be on a spectrum, right? If you think about a startup, they're in the quadrant of, let's self-organize, let's pick a lot of technology out, let's figure out what works for us, and then we'll consolidate or create standards later. You take a classic enterprise, architecture review boards, a lot of investment to consolidate platforms, and they're a lot more stringent in terms of what they call standards. And I think what most organizations have to do today is figure out what the right balanced approach is, right? If you create too structured of a process and say we're only using R, or we're only using Python, or only using Tableau, you might box yourself out of certain capabilities that maybe those tools don't just do. On the other hand, if you have too many of these platforms out and running and about, it's really hard to create a center of excellence of quality, of being able to get some reuse out of what you're doing. And so, I think every organization is very different in terms of where they sit in that continuum. I do think every organization does need to have this continued discussion about what their standards are, and then always looking for better practices. In other words, there isn't a best practice, there's always room to create a better practice. And that means you're constantly learning what that organization needs to do going forward. Hope that answered the question.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. How do you identify and empower citizen data scientist candidates within the business?
It's a great question. I think what it really comes down to is getting to know people. I find, and that sometimes if you're running a big organization, it's really training your staff to get to know people. 10 years ago, if I were a CIO, I'd hear people say, there's a group of rogue IT folks over here, or there's, some shadow IT folks over here. And I'm saying, great, let's go help them, right? Let's go figure out the people who have been really good at technology for a very long time, but they don't want to sit in IT. Or maybe they're crunching through data, they're spitting out spreadsheets, they used to be creating Microsoft Access databases, they're signing up for SaaS platforms. Let's go help them. So, I'm looking for people who are, versatile in technology. They're showing up to some of my brown bag lunches. I'm looking and scanning the file systems to see who's creating a lot of this content. And I'm inviting them into the fold to say, let me help you, let's partner together so that I can give you some better practices and tools to make you successful. Very easy place to start. People ask me when I do this in person. I go to the marketing department first, honestly. It's growth. They're trying to bring business in. The number of tools that they're using is growing faster than what most IT and data organizations can use. You think about Google, you think about SEM buys, you think about lead gen and CRMs. These are all different tools that they haven't figured out how to integrate. That means there's room for IT to help with that. They have some data that they can, analytics they can get out of one tool. What they're really looking for is a cross-the-board view or a customer 360. It's a great place to go find partners and saying, who are people ready to roll up their sleeves and learn how to use some of these new technologies.
Love that. Very, very interesting take on where to start. So thank you very much for that. How do you handle information provenance, which requires passing on constraints and assumptions in addition to data provenance, which only requires validating the data was captured and communicated accurately?
It's a great question. You know, I got a lot of people asking me that. I wrote an article for InfoWorld about data lineage, and try to understand one thing. Most people in your organization aren't going to understand all these terms. Okay, even when I did the article, I had to go digging into what data provenance meant and was it something different. So I think what you need to do first is illustrate the problem statements that you're trying to solve for, and then introduce the terminology. When you introduce the terminologies, you introduce the problems, then you can start looking for some tooling around this, and then you can start building a process around this. And the reason I'm going at it in this order is if you start looking at the entire data governance, data ops landscapes, you're going to find a lot of tooling that overlaps and a lot of the tooling that isn't complete. So you can get data lineage in certain tools right out of the box. Data lineage that's going to work across multiple tools, very hard to go get. So it's really important to walk before you run when you bring these level of understanding into your organization. I think I partially answered that question. So if you want to follow up with me afterward, I'm going to tell you exactly how to go do that. We can have a conversation around that.
Awesome, thank you very much. Actually, the next question is about tools as well, but before I go to that, I just want to quickly comment on a comment made in the chat, which I love. Gilbert mentions, don't conflate ability with degree. Titanic was built by professionals, the Ark by amateurs. I love that. That's great.
It's a great quote.
Yeah. Next question. So what are some tools you recommend for data scientists to be successful?
I actually have an article on that from a while ago. I mean, I think the real question here is understanding which tools are really gearing themselves towards citizen. And so, you know, some of the classic ones that you're already seeing, they've been around for a while. They actually sell directly into lines of business. And, you know, this is the Tableaus, it's the, you know, Power BIs. There's a whole series of them now around self-service BI. So those are a couple that you're going to see on the BI side. On the data integration side, you're going to see tools that label themselves as data prep, and they come across as things like Tableau Data Prep or Wrangler. These are tools to do integrations, data quality that work that are not necessarily starting with IT or starting with the data groups or starting with the analysts and saying to go work with those groups. Then you're seeing some tools that are hybrid. There are enterprise platforms like Boomi that have integration, data catalog, data prep, and so they can start with the data side of things on the citizen side, but then have also the tool to go build the Titanic when you actually need to go do that. So there's a number of different tools in here, and you know, the best thing I tell people is it's a matter of being able to hunt for the tools efficiently, not necessarily knowing all the tools are. Again, I think that's Michael is asking that question. I actually have a video about 5 ways to think about looking for technologies. I think it's by me like 3 or 4 videos ago on my channel, which is my 5 Minutes with NYI channel. So it's all about selecting technologies. And I would suggest going to look at that as a starting point. Thank you. Great question.
There you go. Lots of free content coming out from Isaac. Check it out, folks. Okay, no, have you seen data governance shifted with orgs moving to multi-cloud deployments?
Yeah.
How have you seen data governance shifted with orgs moving to multi-cloud deployments?
it's brought up the question to the forefront more predominantly. And what I mean by that is, it's easier to say we're going to put all our eggs in Azure and we're going to put all our eggs in AWS, which means that you're going to start potentially looking at their services, their tools, and hoping that you're getting, just a more integrated and easier to use experience, maybe a little bit speed to market because you're all on one platform. As soon as you start putting multi-clouds in place, now you're starting to say, well, if I want multi-cloud, am I going to pick a Microsoft tool or pick an AWS tool, which may be very cloud-centric to their environment, or am I going to start looking for capabilities that are going to operate across tools? Data integration, data management is going to fare fairly high in those questions. And most importantly is around data security around this, right? You need to have a program that says, how are we going to secure data, not just in one cloud, but also across multiple clouds and across transmission across clouds. So to answer your question, the answer is yes. But I actually have a talk around this, Jason. I think I gave it one of my last talks at a Sync event about multi-cloud specifically, and it opens up a whole set of questions about what your tooling, what your single pane of glass is going to look like. And if data is centric to your environment, you're going to be using a lot of different data tools and you're looking at different clouds to do this on, you're going to have to look at what your data governance tools that are going to operate across these clouds.
Fantastic. Love this question. Are there any other names we can use for data governance that we can use with those who have an allergy to the term?
Great question. In fact, I try to never use it with a client as much as I can. And so what I try to do is describe the problem, right? Don't necessarily come to them and say, we're going to go solve a data governance challenge or even find a data owner. When I'm going to describe to them and say, look, we have a lot of duplicate data in your CRM, right? We have 5 people by the same name. We have 3 people by the same company. We need to address that. If you're going to do an analysis around profitability against certain dimensions, we have to clean up our geography so that we can do apples to apples analysis around those particular dimensions. Okay, folks, we have 6 different dates in our ERP that we might do this analysis on. How are we going to, which is the right date for us to use for this particular analysis? Now I'm having a conversation around a data catalog and a data dictionary around them. So I'm backing into data governance by describing the problem to the end user and saying, let's go solve this problem because it's impacting your analytics. Cool. Great, super good question.
There's a few other coming in along the lines of this theme of the business, educating the business. One here, how do you drive for data product adoption when the business areas are so busy doing their daily standard business processes and a central data team is sometimes too busy to embed them into the business processes?
Yeah, I think it's important to look across the business and try to find a group that has 3 characteristics to it. Number one, they're impacting, right? They're doing something where data and analytics is really going to be a game changer, ideally in growth areas. Number 2, they're willing to partner. And most organizations I've always walked in, I've done this with $3.5 million charities over to one of the largest brewers in the country. And what I find is there's always groups that I can start off with early adopters. So I'm looking at, are they impacting? Are they willing to partner? And when I find those people, then part of my program is how do I not only make them successful, but how do I market their success? And when I talk about bring the leaders in play, I'm talking about championing those leaders, making them look like heroes and creating a little bit of competition, a little bit of awe, so that I can bring in customer number 2 and 3 to this that may not necessarily have the same problem statement, the same value statement, or maybe the same skills to be able to partner, but they see the impact and they're willing to work with me on. So that's essentially a process that I recommend trying to do at most companies.
Assuming, again, similar answer for this question that came up a couple of times, but just someone here mentions data governance obviously been a huge challenge. The business feels it's a tech issue where it's more of a business commitment and involvement. Your thoughts on how to solve that? similar mindset, similar process?
When I hear it's a data problem is an IT problem or a data problem, and it's not a business problem, I make sure to put that as a price of entry to get the analytics, right? And I see this in a lot of groups that are a little bit further down the curve. They figured out Power BI, they figured out Tableau, they figured out how to get their organization to use it, but then the organization's coming back to IT and say, you fix the data. And so very early on, once they get a taste for the Kool-Aid or taste of the ice cream, I put the brakes in place and say, okay, let's talk about a sustainable process around this. What I'm really trying to do is get one of the people or two of the people to stand up and become data owners without fully understanding what that means. So it's a little bit of a trick to get them to make that commitment, but it's the only way I found ways of getting the organization to take on that responsibility.
Excellent. I'm going to squeeze two questions in very quickly.
Okay.
So the first is, what do you see the impact on citizen data scientists with proliferation of low-code/no-code AI and ML platforms?
Wow. Okay. So citizen data science, and when I look at the data visualization tools that they're using and the data prep tools, I look at those as subcategories underneath low code. They're designed to allow you to build dashboards and analytics without having to go do Python, go do R, or go do any other programming language. A lot of the low code technologies that are setting themselves up for development are getting into other aspects. So how do you do integration? How do you do application development? So they're actually solving other aspects of the continuum that you want to go do, that you need to actually service this. And I just take a step back and I'm like, again, we're dealing with a lot of terminology here, a lot of jargon that the industry has created so that companies can go out and sell these different platforms. I'm back to what type of problem am I trying to solve, right? So as you saw earlier, I talked about, I built customer facing product out of Tableau. I didn't need a low code platform to do that. But if I was doing something transactionable, right, I'm going to collect data up front. Tableau doesn't do that. I might have put a Boomi or a QuickBase or a Microsoft Flow in front of that to be able to do transactions before I was doing the analytics off of it. So again, I'm looking for tools to fit the job. I'm looking for reuse of tools to be able to do certain things, and then I'm looking to actually instrument an architecture that solves the problem.
Fantastic.
Hope that answered the question.
The final question, I'm assuming it's going to be one word answer, but somebody who's kind of teed you up with a nice softball here. Does StarCIO help with leveraging data and analytics to drive smarter, faster, and more innovative transformation of programs and to influence executive decisions?
Simple answer is yes. I mean, you're seeing that on the slide here. What we do is help companies develop their centers of excellence. We do it with workshops. It's usually workshops and assessments are usually where we start. And so for those of you who are trying to figure out, how does StarCIO actually bring business, data, and technology together, we do just that. We do a workshop. We insist on those three groups coming together. We come up with sponsors who give us the goals of the workshop. We share our better practices, and then we adopt them for that organizational need. So there's no one size fits all to do Agile. There's no one size fits all to do data science or DevOps. And we help bring those people from the organization together so they understand the opportunity and problem statement, and then they figure out together what makes sense for the business. Jason, I just want to go back to my first slide here so that everybody sees the URL again. This is the best URL to come to. I'm sharing some of the links, starcio.com/sync-data. If you register there, I do have an email coming out later this week with some more links for you. And then you'll have a way of reaching me with your additional questions that you have and to learn more about StarCIO programs.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, at this point, as always, I always like to ask the audience to join me in a collective virtual round of applause for Isaac. So thank you very much for that, Isaac. Always insightful, always candid. always appreciated. And thank you very much, you folks, attendees. We ran over time in this session, but we did it because there was tons of questions coming in, and throughout there was tons of chatter going on. So that was amazing to see. Looking for more of the same in the next session.